there is a lot of history that happened before Abraham, and most people don't realize that. When you think about Egypt and when you think about Babylon, for example, these were vast and advanced kingdoms. And they had things in there that even to this day the science cannot explain. When you look at the buildings that they have built, when you look at the statues that they have built, when you look at the stonework that they have done, I mean, even today the scientists cannot figure out how was this done. And they're coming to a conclusion that some of these ancient civilizations had this advanced technologies that we have today. I mean, they look at some of the stuff that was done and they say, how was this done without a diamond blade that cut stone, So the history is there. In the book of Genesis, we are starting with what just happens after the flood. So we're going to look at it today. And then next week we are going to talk a little bit about Tower of Babel, which is something that predates all of the kingdoms, you see. And we just want to understand these situations and these events and look at the history as it happened and how it also affects us today. So for example, today we are going to look at this. We are going to be in Genesis chapter 9. And we are going to try and understand how everything that happened there that day, how does that affect us today? And it's really fascinating stuff. So I want us to look at it a little bit. If you have your Bibles, you can open them. If you don't, we will read right off of the screen. So we're going to go to our first slide. We are going to chapter 9, where we read, "Then God blessed Noah and his son and said to them, Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth." So, the flood had just finished. Millions of people perished, died. You know that story. Everybody knows that story. And Milos did a wonderful job this morning of going through that whole story. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to focus on what happens just after that story. So millions of people have died. They come out of this ship that Noah had built, the ark, and they have some animals with them, and they have obviously the seeds for the different plants that they're going to grow, and the life is beginning from scratch. It's almost as if we go back to Adam and Eve. You see, Adam and Eve, they had a clean beginning, and now Noah and his family, they have a brand new beginning. And we read in this chapter how this whole thing started and how it begins. And I am calling this section that we are looking at right now, these next several verses, dominion theology. Because in these next few verses, God is giving all kinds of power and authority to Noah and his sons, and therefore to the humanity, to human beings. And I know you have heard this terminology, dominion theology. And you have that, people have written books and done PhDs on this, but this is where it all started. It all starts in Genesis chapter 9, when God says, go out there and populate the earth, and then in verse 2, the fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth, and on all the birds in the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on all the fish in the sea. They are given into your hands. God is giving human beings the power and authority over everything. Everything is ours to control. When you think about this, and when you think about the implications for us today, you have to come to a conclusion that you and I, we are the masters of our own fate. God gave the authority to human beings over everything. Sometimes you and I, we don't think in those terms. Sometimes we think, I just work for some guy, Or I'm just trying to pay the bills. Or I just need to have money to educate my kids. Or I better do this because if I don't, then all of these things are going to happen to me. What we really need to understand that you and I, whether we realize it or not, we were given the authority over the whole planet. Not just the guy who sits in the White House, not just the guy who is the president of China or Russia. No, you and I, all of us, you see. God gave this to the human beings. He says all of these beasts, animals, the dread will fall on them. And you know that all the animals of the planet, they are scared of human beings. If you go into the woods, the chances are that all of the animals who will hear you will run away from you. Even bears, they don't like to be around humans because humans rule the whole planet. So the implication for you and us and me and all of us is that we are masters of our life on this earth. We are masters of our decisions. We are masters of our choices. We are masters of our future. We are masters of our money. We are masters of everything that is going on in this world, you see. So as long as you are alive, as you have life, you have the ability to choose how are you going to proceed with your life. You have the ability to choose. This last year, I'm reminded, we have had a lot of losses. We have people here in this audience right now, who have lost their loved ones, who have lost a husband, a mother, a sister, a friend. And you come to a point where you almost want to give up, where you're scared, where you are confused, where you don't know what's going on, where you don't know how life is going to proceed. I'm sitting in my house 3 or 4 days ago, and my brother calls me from Florida and says, "Hey, Michael died." And Michael was a friend of ours, a neighbor, my age. Good, really nice guy, And I just saw him this last fall when I was over there, and he came over to the house like he always would, and he hung around with us, and we had food and talked, and everything was fine. And then next thing you know, heart attack, and he's gone. And so many others. And there is a tendency then for us to fall apart. I know that also in this audience we have people today who are facing some life-changing events in their life. Maybe it's an illness, maybe it's a necessity to move, maybe it's something where they have to lose their job or get another one, or serious stuff, And sometimes we'll feel helpless. I want to remind you that when we go back to the ancient history, when God was setting everything up, God basically said, "Hey, you know what? You are in charge. You are in charge. How are you going to proceed from here on out? You're going to give up? You're going to hide in your house? You're going to hide away from the world? You're going to fall into the depression?" You could. And don't make me confuse you. There is time for grief. And there is time for sadness. And there is times to reevaluate everything. But then there is also time to make a decision to move forward. Because of what God did, everything that lives and moves about, God says in verse 3, "will be food for you, just as I gave you the green plants. I now give you everything." So God is putting everything under our control. You have the ability and the God-given right to determine your life. God-given right to determine your life. And that means we can choose to give up, or we can choose to fight and go forward. So that's what dominion theology is. Now in the next verse, we start talking about something totally different. We start talking about social order theology. And all of these things are coming. When I start reading this chapter for who knows how many times, in my life. But when I read this, I all of a sudden realized all of these theologies and doctrines, they're coming from here, from chapter 9. Think about, for a moment, let's just go back to dominion theology. Think about that for a second, how it is also abused, and how we destroy the oceans, and how we destroy the land, and how we destroy the skies, and how we destroy the water, and all of that stuff. And we say, well, we are in charge. We are human beings. We can do whatever we want to do. We can destruction. Why? Because God has given us the dominion. So when you look at this chapter and you look at these things that God has set up here for how life is supposed to be lived, you also find out that it was abused. You see? It's not just about, oh yeah, I'm in charge of my life and I'm going to do the right thing. Some people take it the wrong way. They say, well, I'm in charge, so I can do whatever I want to do. And you see a lot of that today. Next one is social order theology. God just told them you can eat whatever you want to eat, but you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood, I will surely demand an account. So God is setting rules for how we are going to live this life. He says, I will demand an accounting from every animal, and from each human being too. I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. So you see in this chapter, God says, okay, you are in charge. The earth is yours. You are the masters, but you can't kill anybody. You cannot hurt anybody. So I have the right to live my life. I have the right to work. I have the right to save money. I have the right to give to church. I have the right to go out there and be successful in life. I have the right to, if I'm a young person, to go to college and get a degree, or to start my own business. I have the right to advance and to improve and to seek better life for me, for my family, for my friends, for the community. I have all of those rights, but I don't have the right to hurt somebody. So God is, from the very beginning, He's telling them, hey guys, you're in charge now, but be careful what you do. And you can also see how this has been turned on its head today. And you can see all the wars and genocides and murders and hate and just insanity that we see in our world today. We have had now, in this country, we have had a series of attacks on Asian people because there are people who hate Asians. So they walk up to a person, old person, 75-year-old woman, and the guy walks up to her and punches her out. A 30-year-old guy. That's not what God said. God says you can't hurt another human being. If you do that, then you are accountable. God says, I will demand an accounting. Why did God destroy the first world in the first place? Because they basically betrayed all of the rules that God set in the first place. They committed violence against each other. They just went totally against God, and God destroyed them with flood. So now after the flood, God comes back and says, hey, look, you are in charge, but you can't do whatever you want. There are limits. And later on, as you read the Bible and you come to the Ten Commandments and you come to all of the other rules, we find out how we are supposed to live our life. In other words, you have the freedom to live and to prosper, but you don't have the freedom to hurt somebody else. And that's been turned up on its head also. But God says, look, I'm going to demand an accounting. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed. For in the image of God has God made mankind. So let me just make this point. We disagree with each other. We disagree with other people. We sometimes hate other people. We sometimes, as a nation, go to war against other people. We sometimes kill other people. We sometimes do all kinds of bad things to each other because we forget that everybody is made in God's image. Even our enemies. Even people that don't like us. They're made in God's image. And God says, this is the line that you cannot cross. This is the line that you cannot cross. You cannot hurt somebody else. And then in verse 7, God says, as for you, be fruitful and increase in number. Multiply on the earth and increase upon it. So God is telling Noah and his sons, be fruitful, be prosperous, do good, enjoy life, but be careful. And he's telling us the same thing. To me, it's a wonderful thing to have all of this freedom, that God is giving us all of this freedom, you know. But you have to have limits to what it is that you're going to choose to do out of respect for the rest of God's creation. Then we go into verse 8, and this is where God makes covenant with Noah and his sons. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you. So the covenant, the agreement, the deal, you are entering into a contract with somebody. So God says, I'm going to make a contract with you guys. Verse 10, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. Let's see. I establish my covenant with you. Never again, verse 11, will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. So God is making a promise. He's saying, look, be fruitful, multiply, be prosperous, be careful, don't hurt another, and I'm not going to destroy the earth again with a flood. When you think about it, what do you see now, 2021? Isn't it crazy how the world has forgotten these words? How nobody thinks about this anymore. If you talk to an average person out there in any country of the world, they are not going to be aware of this story that we are just reading right now. They are not going to be aware that in ancient times, God from heaven made a covenant with humanity. So many people don't realize, don't understand that we have an obligation to God to behave in a certain way. They just don't get it because they never heard it. They never heard this story. So they are going around doing things that, we look at as Christians and we are like, oh, the world is falling apart. Everybody has become evil. Look at all of the bad things that people are doing. Well, they don't know better. We got to tell them. This chapter has been forgotten for thousands of years. We got to tell them. We got to tell them. We got to remind them that this earth, the humanity, has a contract with God. And God says to us, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to do all kinds of things for you. But you also have a responsibility to behave in a certain way. See, that's our job as Christians, is to remind people of who God is, or what it is that He wants us to do, and how He wants us to live life. And in the Adventist church, we've been doing that for many years. And we try to do that all the time. We try to be an example to others. We try to live a good life. We try to be kind. We try to be gentle. We try to overlook offenses. We try not to take, not to get mad at people because they do something. We try to be like Jesus. That's what we are trying to do. Why? Because we want to remind people of who God is and how He affects all of our lives. And unfortunately, the world is coming to another point in history when Jesus comes, you see, a lot of people are going to be destroyed. And personally, I tell you, personally, I don't know about you, but personally, I feel responsible. As a pastor and as a human being, I feel responsible that we need to do a better job of reminding people of the nature of God. You know what have people forgot? They have forgotten that this earth and everything on it belongs to God. You know, it'd be like somebody rents a house for so many years, and then they forget that it actually belongs to somebody else, and they abuse it. You see, that's how it is now. The humanity has forgotten that God is sovereign, that He's the boss, that we are going to have to answer to Him. So we need to do a job, you know, we need to be reminding people of this stuff. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I'm making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth, and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life on earth. But are we keeping our end of the deal? Are we doing our part? Are we living the life that God wants us to live? God is not going to destroy the earth by a flood, but we know that it's going to be destroyed in the end because God wants to create everything new. And when that time comes, there needs to be a large group of people who are saved by our efforts, by what it is that you and I have done while we were on this earth. So that's covenant theology. When you look at covenant theology, I want to tell you, God is going to do His part always. Because that's just His nature. Question is about you and me. Are we going to do our part? The last few verses that you look in here in this chapter, they have to do with something else has happened that when they came out of the ark. Something else has happened that actually affected the humanity for centuries to come. And that something is a curse. And the story tells us that the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham or Ham was the father of Canaan. These were the three sons of Noah, and from them came the people who were scattered over the whole earth. It says that Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk, and he lay uncovered inside his tent. So something happens. Noah, he comes out of the ark. He's been cooped up, and we can relate to that, right? And I think in his sermon, Milos mentioned this morning that the flood from the beginning to the end lasted for 300 days, which is almost a whole year. So they were cooped in there for 300 days. Imagine that. We relate to that nowadays, right? Because there was times when we couldn't leave the house. You had to wear a mask. You couldn't go to the store. Back in March, shelves were empty in Costco, and people were going nuts, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And we have all kinds of problems and issues now with people having emotional distress and all kinds of just mental issues because they were so secluded for so long. So Noah comes out and he says, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to relax a little bit. I'm going to grow a garden. And he grows a garden, and he grows a vineyard. And you know what happens with a vineyard. You get grapes, and you squeeze them, and there is grape juice, and you leave it out there, for a few days, and then it ferments, and pretty soon you have some good wine. And he drank some of it, and he got drunk. And when people are drunk, all kinds of things happen, right? So he was drunk, and he went into his tent, and I guess he passed out, and he probably didn't even realize that he was naked. And he just went to sleep. No big deal, right? But something happens here. One of his sons, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked. And he told his two brothers outside. So he, I guess, walked into the tent. Dad's lying there, and he doesn't do nothing. Apparently, he thought it was funny. So he goes out there, and he tells his two brothers. But those two brothers, Shem and Japheth, they took a garment, laid it across their shoulders, and then they walked backwards, you see, until they came to where Noah was lying, and then they covered him with that blanket so he wouldn't lay there all exposed and naked. And laid it across their shoulders, and they walked in backwards and covered their father's naked body. Their faces were turned the other way so that they would not see their father naked. So you have three sons. One of them is kind of goofy, doesn't take things seriously, and there are consequences. In verse 24, when Noah awoke from his wine and found out what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan." Now, Canaan was son of Ham, you see. Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. And then Noah also said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend Japheth's territory. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem. And may Canaan be the slave of Japheth." After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. Noah lived a total of 950 years, and then he died. So Noah cursed his son. He put the curse on him. And he put the curse on him and on his grandson and on their sons. And we call this generational curses theology. And some people actually believe that they are cursed. And some people actually believe that they are cursed because of something that their grandfather did. Some people believe that they are cursed because of something that happened in their family tree, who knows when, 300-400 years back. This curse was a serious curse. It says here on the screen that the curse follows its victims everywhere, extending to progeny and all means of livelihood. It includes incurable diseases, slow starvation, abuse by enemies, exile, panic, confusion, and eventual madness. This is the kind of curse that Noah placed on his son for what he had done. How does this affect us today? You have a theology today that was preached for many, many centuries, that Ham had a son whose name was Cush. Cush is the father of Africans. Africans became slaves to everybody else. You have all kinds of theologies that say that Canaanites and the people that lived in that area, by the way, you realize we're all related, right? We are all cousins, some sort. But you have this idea that there is a curse and that these people are going to be cursed forever, and that's how it is abused today, this theology. Now, I want to go to Deuteronomy 28, and we are not going to read the whole thing, and it's not on the screen, but I want to give you an idea of why curses work and curses don't work. Curse only works if God stands behind it. You follow me? I can't just say, "Oh, this person is cursed. I'm going to curse you." Well, that doesn't mean anything. I can curse you, And you can curse me, and you can try to hurt me any way you want to, but it's up to God. Right? It's up to God if somebody's going to be cursed or if somebody is not going to be cursed. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, God says the following, and this is what I want us to remember and conclude this service with. If you fully obey all of these commandments of the Lord your God, the laws I'm declaring to you today, God will transform you into the greatest nation in the world. These are the blessings that will come upon you. And look at then what God says. Blessings in the city, blessings in the field, many children, ample crops, large flocks and herds, blessings of fruit and bread, blessings when you come in, blessings when you go out. The Lord will defeat your enemies before you. They will march out together against you, but scatter before you in 7 directions. The Lord will bless you with good crops and healthy cattle, and prosper everything you do when you arrive in the land the Lord your God is giving you. He will change you into a holy people dedicated to Himself. This He has promised to do if you will only obey Him and walk in His ways. All the nations in the world shall see that you belong to the Lord, and they will stand in awe. The Lord will give you an abundance of good things in the land, just as He promised. And you read on about all of the blessings here that He will bless everything you do. And you shall lend to many nations, but shall not borrow from them, if you will only listen and obey the commandments of the Lord. And this is repeated over and over and over again. In these chapters, we have received the blueprint for life, for how we should live our life on this earth. In these chapters, we can read the mind of God, of how He wants us to live. And you know, when you look at the history of Israel, you find out that they have disobeyed God over and over and over again, right? And they never could have fully experienced these blessings that God has talked about. Why? Because there was always something else that was attracting their attention. There was always something else that they were drawn to. So I want us to take a moment here today and just be reminded. You know, by the way, if you take this chapter, I'm not going to do it right now. We have kids in here. I don't want to scare them. But Deuteronomy chapter 28. Read it. Read the whole thing. Because the blessings are phenomenal. But then when you get into the, if you want, in verse 15, it says, if you want, listen to the Lord your God and want to obey these laws I'm giving you today, then all of these curses shall come upon you. And then the curses start, and there is no end to them, and they are just super scary. They are just like, you don't even want to be in that category of people. So God is giving us a choice today. He's giving us a choice to choose the direction of our life. He's giving us the choice to choose the right decisions. Live your life, enjoy your life, be prosperous, but be careful about not hurting another human being. If you want to be blessed, on top of everything else, if you want to receive a blessing, you see, if you want God to be on your side, well, then do the right thing. And even if it has nothing to do with the blessings, do the right thing. Because on this earth, we're always going to have problems too, right? On this earth, we are always going to have problems. And the ultimate blessing is only yet to come. Even if you and I have the most easiest life on this earth, even if we experience all of the joys and all of the things of this world, it lasts a very short time. The true blessing is yet to come. And that's why we need to live our life on this earth according to the principles that God had laid out in these chapters. I hope that this was interesting to you. Next week we are going to look at the Tower of Babel and all of that ancient technology there and how it affects us also as well today.